Conversation.
So, I get to roam this beautiful tropical island as a disembodied spirit for the rest of eternity. Ha! This is wonderful! So much for karmic retribution! Oh, wait, there's the Grim Reaper. I'm fucked.
Hello, and welcome to the Kongversation. I'm Hyle Russell, and for the first time ever, here on the Kongversation, please welcome, I guess I'll just call you I am Gibbon?
Just Gibbon's fine.
Just Gibbon,
Hi,
okay.
I'm Gibbon, in my best not Daisy impression.
You've gone full Madonna, full Cher, Beyonce, you're just Gibbon now.
Just one word, like Madonna. Yeah, to quote Dr. Claw.
Oh, Dr. Claw.
Oh, you know, in the Inspector Gadget movie. No, Claw.
Oh.
Like Madonna.
Because Doctor Strange
Come on,
also
Hyle.
made a very similar joke, so I just thought you were confusing your medical
I'm
practitioners.
pulling out esoteric film stuff, and you're not keeping up.
Yeah,
disappointed in you.
I'm sorry to not reference the and that was the one with Matthew Broderick, not French
Yeah,
Stewart,
of
right?
course.
Okay, all right, just making sure. So Gibbon, you are, for those of you unaware, the mind behind DKGirder.com, which of course is sort of the mirror universe version of DKVine.com. By mirror universe, I don't mean where the balloons are disco balls or anything. Whereas DK Vine, of course, we focus on what we refer to as the Donkey Kong universe, with Donkey Kong Country as the nexus, the starting point. And then we cover the world that's kind of built up around those games and the spin-offs up through Ukulele and Sea of Thieves and Mario plus Rabbids, three very, very similar games. You focus on the arcade era of Donkey Kong and all of the myriad of paths that sub-franchise took. And, you have always had a broader, less confined or constrained view of what Donkey Kong can be than what I or DK Vine ever has. So that's why I thought you would be perfect to have on this of all episodes, because we are talking about Donkey Kong Jungle Beat. And the Kongversation already did a spotlight episode on Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, and that was back in season 4, in celebration of Cobb Day, of course. But that's not what this episode is. And that episode, it was kind of difficult because out of the two of us, I was the only one who had actually played Jungle Beat thoroughly. So there wasn't a lot of discussion you could be had. It was basically me saying, and then this happens, and I guess this happens, and I enjoyed it, but you don't know. And so that at least we'll have some back and forth between us. And, but we're not really getting too much in depth about the nuances of the game, and then they fought on like Storm Hill, and then they go into space and there's a sumo match. We're not going to be talking about that necessarily. This episode is more about some new facts that have come to light about Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, about its creators, and about their intent in making it. And it's also mostly about me trying to scrub some stains off my soul. So
get some steel wool.
Yeah, I'm gonna go through quite a bit of it, I have a feeling. But before we do that, before we go through all of that, let's get to some due diligence first.
Of course.
Yes, of course. We have to do that. Please think about supporting DK Vine on Patreon, because E3 is almost upon us, and we have our E3 coverage team intact. Mitchell, Jeff, Cameron, and myself will be out in Los Angeles at the DK Vine Love Shack. We will be reporting on all of the Donkey Kong universe, rare and platonic news that is fit to, well, not print, I guess, put on our website, which I guess we don't really have high standards for that as it is.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about it.
Yeah, we'll be out there talking exclusively about the Donkey Kong universe rare, platonic, basically anything DK Vine covers, and we'll be excluding everything else. So if you're tired of the big guys and gals talking about, all these big AAA titles that you don't care about, then just follow E3 through DK Vine. We'll give you this nice, beautiful, narrow view of the world that you won't know what's happening, except for this very, very insular little sphere we've created for ourselves. And that's fine. That's fine. You'll be ignorant just like us, and we'll all be happy together. Yeah.
I'm sorry I can't be joining you guys this year. I'd actually planned on it, but then I got selected to serve on a jury.
Right.
So,
oh, wow. Well, at least you have a person's life in your hands. So
not that kind of trial, but yeah.
Okay. Well, still, you have some power. Don't let it get to your head.
Civic duty instead of, video game conventions.
God, I don't know what I would do if I got selected for jury duty right before E3, because I guess I would go in and just start throwing poop or something just to get out of it.
You can defer. You can defer a couple times, but I'd already used up all my deferments because the first 2 times they'd scheduled me for were the day after Christmas and my birthday.
Oh, wow. That's so weird. I've never been selected for jury duty. Maybe they've done, they've looked me up online and they see DK Vine and they're like, no.
Well, you're pretty off the grid, so I assume you're just not even in the system.
Right. I'm living in a van in the woods. I'm living in a shopping cart that was flung into the swamp per ukulele. So anyway, during E3, Gibbon, you can at least follow along on social media. We're at Facebook, we're on Twitter, dkvine.com/Facebook or Twitter, or the other way around. And we'll be bringing you up to the minute news and just whatever mischief we get into along the way, because we will be getting into lots of merry hijinks as we do. 4 of us out there, I'm sure it'll happen. Also, subscribe to us on BooTube, dkvine.com/BooTube. We get no money from that. It's purely there for, I don't even know. I
don't even know what that is.
Oh, it's YouTube. The thing is,
okay,
because they demonetized DK Vine and because I have not too much in a way of income coming in right now, I've changed it to BooTube. So dkvine.com/BooTube because boo YouTube. But so keep up with the in-jokes, Gibbon. I can't explain everything to you.
That's fine.
Anyway,
there's so many new media and streaming and whatnot sites popping up. I'm just like, okay, I must not have heard of this one yet.
Yeah, it's the YouTube for Ghost, exclusively Ghost-based entertainment. So we have
that Luigi's Mansion coverage.
We have lots of videos up about Cloak and Cackle and the Ghost Ropes and the Ghost Barrels and some of the Ghoulies cast. And then Napper from Banjo-Kazooie, and then the Teehee. Okay. So I could just keep listing Ghosts, all the Krazoa spirits, there's Ghost everywhere. Sorry. The DK Vine hotline, give us a call at 1-202-630-VINE. That's 8463. Do whatever you can to help us get Nintendo President Shintaro Furukawa on the podcast for the big spotlight episode for Mario Golf Game Boy Color this October. We need your help, people. We need to make this happen. And so far, I don't feel like we've gotten any traction on it. So whatever, letter writing, whatever it takes, protest with big placard signs,
I believe in you, folks.
Because there's nothing else important going on in the world right now. There's nothing else we have to protest. It's this, right? So, yes, give us a hand, please. Nobody has found the missing episode of the Kongversation Season 6 yet, Gibbon. And by the way, since you're now co-hosting this episode, you're disqualified from that contest. I regret to inform you. But
that's a shame.
Yeah, you were so close. But the first person to do so and at us on Twitter with where it is gets an autographed copy of the Sea of Thieves #1 comic book. So not only do you get some delightful entertainment, a brand new episode of The Kongversation that nobody has heard, but you also get an autographed copy of Sea of Thieves #1, autographed by the author, Jeremy Whitlape. So it's it'll be like the day after Christmas or your birthday, sans the jury duty, if you're able to do this. So it's not a big ask, people. Just listen to every episode of the Kongversation Season 6 and figure out the mystery and find the episode and do it first. All right. Also, we have another contest. The first person to record a roughly 6-hour audio commentary on our audio commentary of Platonic's ukulele commentaries will get to pick a topic of the conversation this season. You get to choose what we talk about.
You know, someone's going to hold you to that, and it's probably going to be Mamechi.
All they have to do is record a 6-hour audio commentary on our audio commentary of Platonic's ukulele commentaries. Not that hard to do. I'm amazed nobody's done it so far since I threw down the challenge a week ago. Come on. Also, since you're here, check out dkgirder.com.
Ooh, thank you.
Yeah, do you want to give a quick pitch for that?
Sure. We cover, we being me and Milo, another member of the community, we cover pretty much everything DK Vine doesn't. That's almost why the site was created, because they weren't too interested in the arcade games and begrudgingly cover the Mario vs. Donkey Kong games and just some other stuff along the way. But we cover a lot more than just those things. We also do all of Pauline's recent appearances and just other spin-offs and tangentially related stuff from back in the arcade era when legalities were murky and tensions were high. We do a semi-regular podcast called the Arcade Era Power Hour. And right now we're in love with gory detail, and we're convinced that Stan Ottershaw is Stanley the Bugman.
Oh,
so,
like in a Royston and ukulele situation?
Kind of. Parachute Stan came out almost exactly 30 years to the day after Greenhouse, and you have the main character Stanley, who has been drafted into a big war and his adventures, and then Rusty Pup spins off of that. So, yeah.
Well, okay. Well, there you go. And refresh my memory, didn't I give you the idea of naming it DK Girder?
There was a discussion in the forum, and someone, I believe it was a topic about fan sites and how they were dying off, which led to me revisiting the idea of starting my own fan site, and I believe discussions of what such a fan site would be called, because I wasn't the only one with the idea to start an arcade-themed fan site. I was just the one who actually did it. And I ended up registering the name DK Girder as sort of an accompaniment to DK Vine. It seemed so logical once it had been suggested. Just like, oh, of course that's what the site needs to be called.
Yeah, I don't remember if I was the first to suggest that name or if I just advocated for it after it was brought up. But I remember saying specifically that I would love to see a dkgirder.com. And here you are. So thank you for starting it. And it's nice to have, because there is an expectation. Why doesn't DK Vine cover this? This is ridiculous. You're talking about Ryan Stiles and Conquer Live and Reloaded more than you are about the original Donkey Kong arcade game. And it's like,
now you can be like, no, you went the door down the street. Go away.
Exactly. It's beneficial to both of us for each one to exist. So thank you for that. All right. Well, we are going to be talking about Donkey Kong Jungle Beat on this episode, but before we get started, we got a call in a couple of days ago, and I want to play it at the start of the show for reasons that I think will become apparent very quickly. So let me play that, and then I obviously will have some things to say.
Hey, been listening to a lot of the old episodes. You guys are kind of racist and sexist in the old episodes. Is that something you regret? Have you moved on? I hear a lot about Japan Magic Creative. Do you regret making those statements? Do you regret being so problematic? Because I really want to like you guys, and I hope you have moved on.
Yeah. And for the record, this is in reference to me, not anything Gibbon did. Gibbon just walked into the podcast, and
yeah, welcome to my first day.
No, sincerely, thank you for this call. I think this actually eventually serves as a nice springboard into the broader topic of the episode today, but this is also something I've been desperately wanting to circle back to for a while now. I addressed a bit of this a couple of years back, right after the events in Charlottesville, but I feel like I still have more to say, a lot more actually that I need to say on this. So the short, unsatisfactory answer is yes. I absolutely regret that shit. Oh God. I regret a lot. And this episode is primarily about regret. And I'll be plunging the depths of my soul quite a bit as we go on. But please allow me to elaborate a bit on this first. And no, this isn't me trying to make excuses for the types of jokes we made in those early episodes or how we behaved, but to provide context for where I was then versus where I am today, because I'm so sorry. I'm sorry to everyone. And I'm especially sorry to the people we hurt with those jokes. And I know we didn't think we were hurting anyone, but we were. And I'm also sorry to the people who viewed those jokes as an endorsement of a particular worldview, because we absolutely failed you. I've always been involved with DK Vine in its almost 20-year history, but a decade ago it was in more of a part-time capacity. I'd pop in, do something kind of incognito, not wanting to draw attention to myself, but, I was still invested in the site, and at the time I was out in Los Angeles, trying to, work as a full-time screenwriter, and that crashed and burned pretty dramatically, so I was left adrift in life, broke and without direction. And then they announced Donkey Kong Country Returns, and Chad and I both got the itch to come back to the site full time. And I guess it was a chance to reclaim a small part of our childhood. And we did, and we started a podcast called The Vine Donkey Kong audio program that predated this one. And we thought it would be funny if we played truly terrible versions of ourselves on this show, because I think the way we looked at it was, oh God, we're pathetic man-children, and we're talking about Donkey Kong games, and we needed to blunt that reality by hiding under about 15 levels of irony and cynicism. And so we portrayed who we thought we would be if we weren't us, the type of people we would be if we weren't the people we were, if that makes any sense. Like, we never had the worldview of the characters we were playing. We didn't actually think any of that crap. We just thought, hey, isn't it funny that gamers can sometimes be awful people? Let's laugh about how horribly toxic this hobby we haven't outgrown can be. And then Gamergate happened, and the events of the last few years have happened. And I can say no, there's honestly nothing funny about it. But at the time, it was a flavor of comedy that was popular. Being a transgressive edgelord, saying something shocking for a laugh, and then have everyone giggle about how terrible you were because, hey, you're not hurting anyone, right? You're the one who's the butt of the joke, because who but the biggest idiot on the planet would say that stuff? I mean, this was even prevalent on mainstream comedies at the time, stand-up, sitcoms, and cartoons and movies. But of course, it was dialed up even more online to an almost disgusting degree. And we were in such a privileged little bubble, thinking that by playing obviously terrible people, we weren't actually doing any harm. And if I'm honest, this is kind of why the James Gunn situation really resonated with me. When he was fired by Disney for very similar, edgelord jokes that he had since outgrown. I was heartbroken for him, but I saw so much of myself in that situation. And I really wondered if we had hit a point where we wouldn't allow people to grow and everyone would be held accountable forever for the mistakes they had publicly made. And please don't mistake me. I'm not asking for anyone's forgiveness here. I just want to be granted a chance to be able to work for it. So, anyway, when the Vine audio program got to be too much production work, I wanted to do a more stripped down, bare basics podcast about this stuff, because that was important to me. And that's where the Kongversation began. And the problem there was that at first, we didn't know how to do a podcast without being those characters on the Vine audio program. That was all we knew how to do for 2 years or so. So we immediately fell into the same style of humor, even if we were supposed to be ourselves. And I'll admit to being the worst offender of this. Chad was the straight man, and I was the guy who said crass, outrageous, and sometimes disgusting things. I was a shock radio DJ, essentially. Howard Stern's penis. And of course, we eventually drifted away from that style. I got just as uncomfortable with that as everyone else. And as time passed, we kind of shook those Vine audio program personas. But I don't know if I ever really stopped hiding behind a put-on personality. Maybe not the one I had been doing, but I was still underneath a mask. And I think I've been doing that during my entire time on DK Vine. I was so desperately afraid of allowing the real me to come out, that I would rather have hidden behind several characters, even if they were awful and repugnant, because I didn't think anyone would really like or respect the real me, even though I've let that slip through from time to time. Like anytime I get weirdly emotional or sappy on this show, like that's a glimpse of the real me. But too often I've tried to bury that. And the story of my life in this past decade, it's been the slow walk towards self-acceptance, towards liking myself, I guess. Looking back, I don't know if I ever really even let Chad see the real me during our creative partnership and friendship. I probably thought he expected certain things of me, to be the jokey huckster, dripping with cynicism. And that's what I hid behind. Even when we were roommates, I hid behind that, and I did him a disservice. I did myself a disservice, but I've been doing it my whole life. I compartmentalize. That's just what I do. I would become a different person for each environment I was in. A different circle of friends or my family, I would be somebody completely different. And I've been doing that since I was a kid, being the person I thought was expected of me in any situation rather than being the real person underneath. And honestly, there's only been a handful of times in my life that I ever let down my guard enough to show that and let somebody actually know the real me. And that's just because I was afraid. I was afraid of being rejected. And it's only been recently, I guess, in the past few months, that I feel like I've finally allowed the real me to come out on DK Vine and here on the Kongversation. And this has been a point I've been struggling to get to for the better part of the last decade, but I didn't get here myself, and I had indirect help and positive influences that gave me the courage to drop the mask and not hide myself anymore. And it also gave me a lot of perspective about the role I play in this community, about how words matter, even if you try to downplay it by saying you just run a Donkey Kong website. And this is a debt I can never repay for as long as I live, but thank you, because you know who you are, I thanked you, and I will be trying to make it up to you for the rest of my life. And that's why I now understand that I'm sort of the big brother of this community, and that's a role I'm extremely proud of. And I want to protect and look out for everyone who comes to DK Vine, who listens to the Kongversation, and I want them to know that they are loved, that they may be put down in their day-to-day life, or they may not be coming from supportive homes, or society's telling them to be this or be that, but that doesn't matter, because so long as they have love and respect for others, they have a home here with us. And I'm going to look out for them however I can, no matter what their race or their gender orientation, their sexuality, or their religion or creed is. And I'm sorry that it took me so long to understand that responsibility. We're bound together by this weird love we have of these games. And there's something special about that. It unifies us and it can unite us. And we're all very different, but we have that in common. And maybe if we can carve out a lovely little community for ourselves that's a beacon of light in a world that just feels increasingly dark, maybe that's making a little bit of a difference. I don't know. And if there's one thing I'm adamant about doing with DK Vine going forward, it is helping others being able to accept themselves for who they are. I can't go back in time and change my behavior from years ago. Now, I wish I could, but I can't take that stuff back. But if I can help others now learn to accept and love themselves, maybe others won't have to hide behind any mask. And maybe then some good can come from all of this. So, I'm sorry again, and thanks for listening. And, I've been thinking that, sometime really soon, I'm going to remove the first 2 seasons of this podcast from the various networks it's on. Don't worry, I'll still make sure they're available directly on our site. Probably with a vintage Looney Tunes, these were products of their time, listener discretion is advised disclaimer. Because I don't want to lose those episodes entirely or hide them away from anyone who really wants to hear them. Because there is some good stuff in there. I just don't want new listeners to discover the show or this community and then go back to the beginning and get the wrong idea of what we're about. And what we're about, of course, is poop jokes. We've got a lot of great poop jokes coming up. So please stick with us. So, hi, Gibbon.
Hi. You need a moment?
No, I might need to lie in the corner for a bit. I'll let you take over the reins of the show for a while. No, thank you for letting me have that moment.
Yeah, no. That was... I don't know if I would have been able to make that speech. So...
My mouth is very dry right now, so...
Yeah, get a glass of water or something.
Speaking of something else brought up in that call, though, and that's the unfortunate terminology we used on DK Vine back early to mid-aughts and beyond to describe the GameCube era of Nintendo. And, many of those games are viewed as classics today, and deservedly so. But back then, there was this opinion, mostly on DK Vine, but maybe elsewhere too, that Nintendo was trying too hard to be innovative rather than just giving us good games. Mario's got a water gun. I hate that. Luigi's got a ghost vacuum. It's trash. Should just be on BooTube. Zelda is now cel-shaded and it's about sailing. Let me tell you, Gibbon, I will never like a game about sailing the ocean. I don't see how that's possible.
Oh, man.
Opinions that have held up really well over the years.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But there was one thing that set DK Vine off like no other thing, and that is the marriage of Donkey Kong and bongos. Specifically, the DK Bongo peripheral controller and the 3 or 4 Donkey Kong games. Because, depending on where you lived, if you lived in Japan, you got 4. And we almost had 5 had Barrel Blast made it out in the GameCube as intended, and I kind of wish it did now, but... Yeah,
its Wii controls aren't great.
No, that's a game that absolutely needed the bongos, and we were so happy, we were like, yay, it won't have the bongos, and then years later it's like, oh no, it should have had the bongos. Again, perspective, self-growth, it's not a bad thing, people. You can look back on your past and say, whoa, I was wrong there. I was an asshole. It's good. It's healthy. I recommend everybody do it. Do it today.
Don't let Daly hear you forgiving the bongos like that.
No, I mean, look, I fucking hate Donkey Konga 2. Don't get me wrong. But as far as gameplay goes, you needed the bongos for the way Barrel Blast was designed. You just needed to do it. All right, but I think a lot of this strife had to do, of course, with timing. So Rare had just been purchased by Microsoft, and for the first time in 8 years, the first time since the launch of Donkey Kong Country and the birth of that segment of the Donkey Kong fandom, we did not know what the future held. It was uncharted territory. We had no hindsight here because there was none to be had. It was the past was the present. The first generation Donkey Kong Country fans, we were just staring into this gaping maw, this abyss, and we were unsure if Nintendo was going to just go back to like Donkey Kong 94, that style of arcade gameplay, which I'm sure, you would have been happy and content with, Gibbon. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I'm saying for our purposes at the time, that was the fear.
I gotcha.
We didn't know if any of Rare's creations would even be kept, or if they would try to replicate Donkey Kong Country on their own, but lacking the particulars of what made us find Rare's take on the franchise so endearing. And it's funny, going down that list of possibilities, because one could argue that all of those fears or possibilities actually came true in a vacuum at one point or another during the last 16 years. As well as the complete opposite as well. We've definitely been through quite a lot over the years, through the hard times and the good, as the song goes. But, we do have the benefit of hindsight now. And I can honestly say no Nintendo franchise in that early GameCube era was as full of possibility or had the potential for disaster like Donkey Kong. It was completely unique in the powder keg that had just been lit.
Yeah. And I think part of that was this was Nintendo going into their era where they were homogenizing character designs and also sort of nailing down one franchise per genre. Because you kind of saw some of their duplicate stuff drop off at this point, like F-Zero kind of got weirdly experimental with let's go with like the anime story route and keep Mario Kart to being the pure racing game. And like Donkey Kong, we already have like the Mario platformers, so what are we going to do with Donkey Kong?
Right.
Thing.
Yeah, it was like everything had to have its own identity, and that was especially bad for Donkey Kong, I think, because Donkey Kong was sort of without a home, without a parental figure to watch over it, aside from, Miyamoto has always been protective of Donkey Kong and looked out for it, but it was definitely just kind of adrift at the time, and a lot of people wanted to develop Donkey Kong games, and that led to a lot of divergent takes. So we were nervous. DK Vine was nervous, and weirdly, that got me more invested in the community, because Chad and I had taken a bit of a break to do our crappy webcomic, and I came back to DK Vine right around the time of the buyout, because I felt like, oh, my people need me. Like, we have to rally together as I wasn't even thinking in those terms at the time, but I guess I sort of was, Like, we need to stick together, us Donkey Kong Country fans, because we don't know what the future's going to hold. Like, I was sure Banjo and Conker were going to be fine because they were still with Rare, but, and you can debate whether or not that turned out to be the case. I would argue, yeah, essentially it did, but Donkey Kong, it was just completely, it was like a Rorschach test. We were projecting our own fears and insecurities onto this canvas. And then they announced Donkey Konga. And I remember it felt like to me, because Donkey Konga was really the first product that had been announced. They had announced what became Mario vs. Donkey Kong even before the buyout, but it hadn't evolved to that point yet. You would be the one to correct me here, but it was still like Donkey Kong Plus at the time, I think. Yeah,
Donkey Kong Plus, it was still in the stages of being just a pure remake of Donkey Kong 94, but with like ACM graphics instead of the Game Boy look. Yeah. And then it evolved into what it eventually came out as.
So Donkey Konga was the first kind of glimpse of what we would be getting. And so I remember just thinking, it feels like Nintendo is not taking this seriously, because Donkey Kong is serious business. It felt like they weren't treating the franchise with the reverence I thought it deserved, because they were giving it to Namco, and it was a drumming game set to pop songs. How dare they? And sure, had Rare stayed as the primary caretaker of the franchise, we would have gotten spin-offs beyond just racing games. Yeah. But you process something like Donkey Kong Coconut Crackers differently when it's a Game Boy Advance title that's coming from Rare several years deep into their run with the series. And then Donkey Konga as the inaugural what Nintendo is doing with Rare's baby game.
Yeah. I was actually looking at some Coconut Crackers early development stuff the other day as I was looking into It's Mr. Pants. And oh man, I dig the look of that isometric thing they had going on.
Yeah.
Like, I understand why they changed it in the end, but it had such a unique look for a puzzle game, especially with all the little Donkey Kong elements going on and like the Kremlings running around on the board and stuff.
Yeah, I like the way Coconut Crackers tried to make it fit within the world of Donkey Kong. Like, it's literally like the characters running around this puzzle environment. Yeah. It's not just things falling down in front of static backgrounds. But ultimately, I think I'm more happy that we got It's Mr. Pants. Yeah.
But also, like, given that weird take on the Donkey Kong Country world, I totally get what you mean when you say, well, it's one thing if it's Rare doing this. We know that they're going to do a good job with it, versus, like, who the heck are these guys and why are they doing such a weird take on Donkey Kong Country?
No, absolutely. And again, if it had been Rare who announced Donkey Konga in 2003 or whatever, I would have been like, okay, but it wasn't. And we were worried. We were scared. And then came Mario vs. Donkey Kong, which was a pseudo arcade revival that's near and dear to your heart, Gibbon.
Yeah.
But to those of us who had this paranoia festering on the inside of us that the World Rare build-up was going to be forgotten, here is this game with the Donkey Kong Country style Donkey Kong acting as the villain of the piece, fighting Mario with nary a familiar set piece in sight to us Donkey Kong Country fans. It wasn't entirely reassuring. I remember with Mario vs. Donkey Kong thinking, I kind of almost like this idea. Like, I like that it looks like a pre-rendered ACM Donkey Kong almost. And okay, he's fighting Mario again. I can sort of get behind that because I'm going to view Mario as the villain because I'm biased. I'm biased and just, I'm ready to hate Mario. Bring it on. But that was me trying to rationalize. I was very nervous. And eventually,
to be fair, Mario's an asshole in that series.
He is. And to be fair, Mario's really an asshole in any game if you look close enough. But, I don't know. There was that take. And then eventually DK King of Swing, which played nothing like any Donkey Kong game before, but it reveled in the characters and lore of Rare's games. And of course, the Rare handheld team, they were still involved somehow at this time with Donkey Kong. They were making the Game Boy Advance remakes of the Donkey Kong Country trilogy, and then eventually Diddy Kong Racing DS. Diddy and other Kongs, and even Kremlings, they were also getting involved in the Mario sports titles, and that started to blur the line a bit between the Donkey Kong series and the Mario series, and it gave the former this reputation, especially among younger gamers, that it was nothing but a subset of the Mario series. And, that's something that Nintendo is trying to course correct now. But for about a decade, that was the status quo. And my point about all of this, though, talking about all of these directions that we were being pulled at the time, was that there is this battle, this almost civil war for the spirit of Donkey Kong, for the direction the series was going to take. Because Rare's stewardship had fallen, and you had all of these various teams, and maybe factions is too harsh of a word, but you had all of these perspectives and ideas all competing each other at the exact same time, all vying for what Donkey Kong was going to be going forward. Was it going to be a subset of Mario? Were we going to keep the rare characters and environments around, but just with a more kind of Nintendo philosophy or worldview balancing them? Or was Rare just going to somehow keep developing games for the Game Boy and keep deciding the direction of Donkey Kong covertly for the next 20 years? Like, we didn't know what was going to happen. So it was a weird time to be a Donkey Kong fan. And it was just a weird time to be, I guess, running the biggest Donkey Kong website that's standing at the moment. And it didn't bring out the best in us. And we'll get into that a bit. But looking back, I'm amazed we kept it together as best we did, because I don't know any other franchise that had such tonal whiplash as Donkey Kong during the buyout years. Like, up through Donkey Kong Country Returns, there was no unified identity for it.
Well, like, Doctor Who had just finished up their sort of wilderness years where it was going in all sorts of directions. They went through something similar where the show was off the air for several years, and like there were several different competing novel lines that each had different tones and whatnot. Like, one was trying to be episodic, light kid stuff. One was supposed to be super serious, like dark. We're gonna have sex and swearing in Doctor Who now, and there were comic books and some video game attempts and whatnot, and that was all sort of. And then the show came back on the air, and we suddenly had like the main series again. And everything just sort of fell into place around that. And I think Donkey Kong as a whole sort of went through the same process, where it had all the spin-offs, but it lacked the core that those things were supposed to branch out of. And as such, it was all sort of aimless and all over the place until the series came back.
So what you're saying is Donkey Kong Jungle Beat is the Shulka Doctor?
No, Donkey Kong Jungle Beat is the 1996 movie that half the fans still refuse to admit exists.
Okay, but at least that's canon. At least, you know.
Also, you know what the Shulka Doctor is.
I know things, Gibbon. So yeah. Then there is Jungle Beat. There is Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, the main Donkey Kong title of the GameCube generation. That generation's Donkey Kong platformer. It's, I guess, the equivalent to Donkey Kong 64 on the Nintendo 64, or the Donkey Kong Country trilogy on the Super Nintendo. And Jungle Beat, to us, represented another possibility that hadn't really even occurred to me at the time of the buyout. I remember, like, September 2002, the day after the buyout was announced, thinking about all the possibilities, thinking about Banjo and Conquer on the Xbox, and also thinking about what Donkey Kong would look like now under Nintendo. And I imagined a Donkey Kong Country style game that was maybe without the humor, without the dry sarcasm or the self-deprecation. Something very similar, honestly, to Donkey Kong Country Returns. I imagine Kremlin's in there, but you know, it took a while for that one. But you know, I imagined essentially what we would eventually get. But what I did not predict would be this possibility of a compromise where they would give us something somewhat similar in style to Donkey Kong Country, or at least its world, but with a totally original cast of Nintendo creations. And Gibbon, that possibility was honestly mortifying when it sank in, especially after this purported interview we're going to get to. But yeah, because look, I know not all fans feel this way. Absolutely not. But for a lot of us, for a lot of Rare era Donkey Kong fans, while we love Donkey Kong himself, he wasn't the heart of the series. That was Diddy and Dixie, really. Diddy and Dixie were the ones we grew up with. Diddy and Dixie were the ones who had like their hero journey during the series. Donkey Kong was more of this mentor role. He was the Obi-Wan Kenobi. He wasn't even really the focal point most of the time. And even besides that, Rare's games were all about family and community and your animal buddies and just being a big goofy band of misfits. And to not have any of that in the big Donkey Kong platformer, immediately coming after Rare's acquisition by Microsoft, to only have a game starring Donkey Kong. I didn't know how it felt exactly. It felt like it was missing the point of the entire thing. And
I imagine it felt a lot like Konami announcing Metal Gear Survive.
I will take your word for that, because I don't have a point of reference.
Very, very similar situation. They just fired Kojima, and everyone was wondering what they were going to do with the Metal Gear franchise now that the man who made Metal Gear for the past, 30 years was gone. And they're like, look, we're using his engine and getting some of his people to work on this, and we're announcing the next Metal Gear Solid game, Metal Gear Survive. It's a sci-fi zombie survival base-making multiplayer game with online stuff and microtransactions.
Oh, okay. Well, thanks for the context. Is this kind of video game knowledge you can expect to bring you the best E3 coverage on the planet in just a couple of weeks? Cannot wait. The weird thing about Jungle Beat being announced, though, it was E3 2004 that it was announced, and we weren't entirely worried exactly at that moment, because while Jungle Beat was announced and we didn't see anything recognizable in it, there was still King of Swing that was announced right alongside of it, and King of Swing, that had Diddy, that had Dixie, it had Funky, it had Kremlings, it had the damn ghost of Wrinkly Kong floating around. Like, King of Swing was just... by the way. Well, yeah. It was the complete opposite of what we were seeing with Jungle Beat. So, kind of getting mixed signals here. I was like, what's happening? I was less bothered by the fact that Jungle Beat utilized the bongos as a controller than it not having any recognizable characters or enemies outside of Donkey Kong himself. And again, I talked about this tug of war that seemed to be happening for Donkey Kong within Nintendo and all of the studios developing for it at the time. And it was clear as day right there, E3 2004. Well, we have Jungle Beat, but we have King of Swing. Neither one is exactly what we want. One is a platformer, but it uses the bongos, but it doesn't have any recognizable characters. One is a peg swing game, whatever the hell that is, but it's got all of these references. It's got the flip-flaps from Donkey Kong 64, the purple bats from Donkey Kong 64. It's got, eventually Payon would have Jungle Climber, they would have Barrel Blast, and that would bring in even more characters like Quawks, the purple parrot. I mean, yeah, the deep cut references that Payon would bring. There was a joke on the forum at the time that there must be a Payon spy taking notes.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and I don't think there was a Payon spy. There were Rare spies, we know that, but no, there weren't any Payon spies for sure. Anyway, so yeah, I think what we failed to register at the time was that Payon was this separate studio who just happened to be massive fans of Rare's Donkey Kong games. And so they filled it with lots of love and references, making their own distinctive style of games, but still loading it up with characters from that world, which we appreciated. Yeah. But Jungle Beat, on the other hand, was developed in-house by Nintendo EAD Tokyo. And the game was headed up by Yoshiaki Koizumi, who was the director, and Takeo Shimizu. I'm sorry. Shimizu, yeah. I'm terrible pronouncing even English names, so it's always a struggle for me, no matter what I do. He was the producer. So I think for us, it always felt like it was more authentically the word of Nintendo. What Jungle Beat was stating was actually how Nintendo really felt. And anything that Payon was doing was nice, but it didn't have much weight. Oh my god, this is awesome. We've got this game and it's got all of these characters we love in it, but it's coming from this separate studio and they don't have the same autonomy that Rare did, and all these other studios are developing for Donkey Kong. And really, it's all down to what Nintendo thinks and feels. And, people ask, well, how could you be worried? How could you think Diddy was not going to get into Super Smash Bros. Brawl when you had Diddy showing up in all these games? And regardless of how many critters Camelot or Next Level Games were able to shove in sports titles at the time, Jungle Beat really was what we viewed as the measuring stick. And so that was a whole bunch of worry, but we weren't completely worried again because we were still kind of optimistic about Jungle Beat. At least I was, at least at first. The original presentation at E3, it wasn't that impressive visually yet, to be honest. The environments were kind of flat and lacking much detail. It kind of looked like Donkey Kong running around in an ant farm.
Yeah, some of those early shots. I'm surprised you weren't more worried, actually. There's some stuff from that early beta footage that probably would have set you off right proper had you recognized what you were looking at.
I don't know what you're referring to. Are you referring to the Capuchins, the party monkeys being like little Donkey Kong Jr. type looking guys?
Yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah, I wasn't that worried, and honestly, it was because it had somewhat... They were boring to look at, but they were somewhat realistic-looking environments. And so long as Donkey Kong wasn't running around in a Mario-esque environment, I was willing to kind of meet it halfway a little bit. I was like, okay, I don't really know how I feel about this, but I'm also interested, and I'm willing to give it a shot. So, the enemies looked really strange. I remember the first screenshot... One of the first screenshots I saw was Donkey Kong's head getting gnawed on by all of those rats. And he had, sweat pouring down from him. And I'm like, what kind of weird, fever dream is this? And that spawned the DK Vine meme that the whole game was Donkey Kong overdosing on cough syrup, which I believe was a popular recreational activity among certain people at the time. Not me. Certainly not me. I hate the taste of cough syrup entirely, so I would never indulge in it in that way. But I think among the youth at the time, it was definitely the in thing. The youth, they would go around college campuses swigging their Robitussin, and so people made that argument. I was like, Hyle, this should be DK Vine's official interpretation that it's Donkey Kong tripping. And I rejected that. I was like, no, because they are going to reference this stuff again. We can't say it's Donkey Kong tripping because, one, why would Donkey Kong trip on cough syrup? And two, they're going to bring back some elements eventually. Just you wait and see. And they did, although not to the extent I once believed.
Yeah. Which I swear to rectify the minute Nintendo stops denying that I'm going to work there someday.
I feel like we're in a Cold War, the two of us, because I'm trying to influence Rare and Playtonic over here. Hey, do this, ha 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 ha. And you're trying to influence Nintendo over there. Hey, do this. And we're going to come to blows one of these days. We're going to contradict each other. No, I think what really sold me, though, on Jungle Beat, well, not sold me, but alleviated my fears, was that Donkey Kong was the protagonist. He was the hero of whatever story they were telling. And so, at the very least, they weren't taking him back to pre-Donkey Kong Country. He is the bad guy. Donkey Kong is a villain. We're going to completely forget about Cranky Kong being the original arcade Donkey Kong. Donkey Kong is the villain. And, in light of Mario vs. Donkey Kong, it allowed me to take, honestly, everything a little bit more in stride. Like, the totality of Donkey Kong at the time was confusing and a lot of mixed messages. And despite all of that, it was like all of these things getting log jammed to prevent, they weren't getting through to the panic center of my brain quite yet because they were all canceling each other out. So, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would have also been, had Nintendo wanted to completely clean slate, it would have been the perfect opportunity to do another redesign of the character.
Oh, yeah. Because they were standardizing all of their characters at this time. They were unifying the art style. So this is when you really... Which is weird, because King of Swing had a hand-drawn style. And occasionally you will see games use different styles, but... you look at the contrasting renders of the N64 era or the mixture of hand-drawn art and CG renders, from the Super Nintendo era. And the GameCube era is when I put a stop to that. It's like everybody will have a unified look despite, Smash Brothers getting more elaborate, like
getting to that very Disney, got to stay on brand. This is the look for this character.
And Sakurai and his team would be able to deviate from that a bit. Rare was able to deviate from that a bit, although not as much as you would think with Diddy Kong Racing DS. And, but by and large, the characters have had a standardized look since the GameCube era with tweaks along the way. Diddy has been tweaked. Donkey's gotten a nose job, but,
It's
anyway.
actually kind of Payon who influenced that. But yeah.
So anyway, all that being said, everything was still ensuring. Jungle Beat came out in Japan at the end of 2004, and I believe it came out in Europe in early February 2005. And on the verge of it being released elsewhere, which was the Americas and Australia, the interview dropped. The infamous interview. Oh my god, the interview. February 18th, 2005. Our old buddies at IGN posted an article, and this article was actually an interview from Nintendo Online Magazine in Japan with Koizumi and Shimizu that was translated not by IGN, but by one of their affiliate sites, that was a thing, called Insider, particularly by someone on Insider with the name Anthony J.C. Okay, so, by the way, Gibbon, this is just an aside. Did you know that we tried to get DK Vine as an IGN affiliate when we were first starting out?
I did not.
Yeah. We thought that would be great because we loved IGN at the time. We respected IGN. And we thought, wow, if we could be, because we saw the Zelda fan site was an IGN affiliate. And we were like, well, surely there's room for a Donkey Kong fan site. I have to say both IGN and DK Vine dodged a bullet when they rejected us.
I mean, you guys could have been the ones to do the translation of the interview.
None of us spoke Japanese, so.
Oh, okay, never mind.
Yeah, there we go. So this interview, Gibbon, pretty basic stuff, I would say. Like nothing that really would raise the hairs on the back of your neck. Although I shave the hairs on the back of my neck. I'm big into manscaping, so I make sure that my neck is nice and clean at all times.
If I did that, I'd just have this bald patch in the middle of the rest of my hairy body.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. So I have a hairy chest, hairy arms and legs, but I'm speaking way too much about my grooming habits right now. Leave it to your imagination. But no, this interview was fine, except for one particular passage. And I think most of us listening to this know it. For those of you strolling in, what an episode for you to first tune into. But for those of you who are relatively new to this community and haven't heard any of this, there is a passage that has taken on such legendary proportions in the Donkey Kong and Rare fan communities that is one of these, I have it listed in my notes here as a seismic flashpoint, which is pretty dramatic, but I think if you're able to chart the timeline of our community physically on some sort of graph, then you would show an enormous spike of psychoreactive energy right here, February 18th, 2005. This is when collectively we all screamed. Gibbon, you are the guest here, and I've been talking way too much on this episode, so would you like to read this supposed quote as translated by Anthony J.C. from Insider?
Oh, I'd be honored. Okay. All the characters outside of Donkey Kong and the Banana are completely original. we don't really feel the past look of Donkey Kong was fresh enough for today. We really gave our new development team the chance to really create something unique and stylish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kaboom! Not Kaboom. Not Kaboom the character, because they're not fresh enough for today's Donkey Kong. Oh, God. Yeah, it like hurts still hearing that, even though I know it's not true now. It hurts still reading that, because I'm like,
yeah.
Oh, my heart. It hurts. Oh. So, I think quite rightly, at the time, taking this at face value, there was nothing wrong with feeling absolutely hurt by this. And it was basically an open declaration of war, the way we viewed it. The wait and see attitude I had about Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, it might not be so bad, and we're getting all this other stuff, and I will just enjoy this for what it is. All of that was out the window. This was now a battle for our fandom survival. This was now a battle for the characters that Rare had created for their survival. It was now just a struggle to keep these things relevant. Everything we felt from September 2002 to February 2005, the fears but the hopes, were now replaced totally by irrational, well, not irrational, it was kind of rational at the time, but just this burning anger, this rage that could not be quenched, at least not for quite some time. And, I don't want to pin this completely on us reacting to this interview. There were a lot of factors that contributed to this. And there's a lot of things going around in the culture of video game, and especially Nintendo fandom at the time, that contributed to us feeling this way. This was just the tipping point. This was just the straw that broke the back. And, we have that possibly falsified Miyamoto quote that's been floating around for years that really gained...
Let's go with apocryphal.
Well, I mean, potentially apocryphal. We don't know, how... If this is mistranslated, we don't know if he actually ever said this, but this really grew to prominence around this time, this era as well. And I'll read this one. Donkey Kong Country proves gamers will put up with mediocre gameplay if the art is good. Ooh, so I don't know if he ever actually said that. He has since come out saying he doesn't believe he said it, but if he did, he wants to clarify that he never disliked Donkey Kong Country. And, maybe the truth is somewhere in the middle. I certainly don't hold any ill will towards Miyamoto. Now, today, I did back then, of course, but, I think certain factors were pushing us in these directions. Certainly our own immaturity didn't help, but it was, like I said, it was a multitude of factors. It was a bubbling cauldron of strife at the time.
Yeah. Miyamoto's cool dude, but I'll never forgive him for Project Giant Robot.
You'll never forgive him.
Nope.
You'll never send a Christmas card to him or receive one from him. You're permanently enemies. Yeah, there was this also just a shitty attitude. And I talk about our shitty attitude at DK Vine, but there is a shitty attitude that had cropped up about Donkey Kong Country, about the trilogy, about Rare in general. And this attitude was prevalent among what I have listed as the tastemakers of Nintendo fan culture during this era. And I think a large part of it, and I've tried to figure this out so much over the years, so much so that it's almost not even worth wasting any more mental energy over. But I think a large part of it was, on their end, an immature reaction to Rare no longer being a part of Nintendo, no longer developing games for Nintendo, at least on a full-time capacity. And now they're suddenly developing games for the Xbox, their upstart competitor, which everyone hated. How dare they? They don't make video games. Fuck you, Bill Gates.
Yeah, there's definitely a bitterness, maybe is the right word. And like, it wasn't just the fan sites and stuff. There was like a little bit that cropped up into like Nintendo Power itself.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So not even the fan sites. It was in the legitimate gaming press. I mean, and we've just established, how questionably legitimate the gaming press was back then when we have blatantly we haven't even gotten into how blatantly mistranslated that interview was, but suffice to say, blatantly mistranslated. But you would see, IGN certainly had this attitude. Game Informer, I remember being noxious about this stuff. Even, as you said, Nintendo's official magazines, Nintendo Power in the US, their UK magazine really went hard after Donkey Kong Country. And the characters as well, and just basically everything about them was suddenly shit and overrated, and how foolish we were to think these were ever good games. And I think part of this, too, was because the people who had really grown up with Donkey Kong Country, who had been the right age when Donkey Kong Country first hit, and younger, they weren't in positions of authority anywhere in the media, so you had no counter narratives. This was coming from, I think, the older NES crowd or NES crowd, which didn't really have that emotional connection to Donkey Kong Country. Some of it was probably coming from people who just felt hurt and betrayed, and we have to disavow anything Rare did because they are now the enemy. But
the team sports mentality.
Yeah, I think a lot of it too was just from people who never got struck by the initial Donkey Kong Country mania, who never actually were able to be taken by the game. Sort of like how I'm just slightly too old to really appreciate SpongeBob SquarePants. Now, I never hated SpongeBob SquarePants, but I'm like, people think I'm the right age. I'm actually like a year or two too old to have really gotten into it. So I was aware of it, but it just feels like it's completely like 10 years my junior when it was actually like right up next to my childhood. But I just a different kind of thing. I just fell out of that window. Like Transformers too. People think I should be a Transformers fan. I was like 1 or 2 years too young for Transformers, so I never got into Transformers. Like, that window of pop culture, it's funny where you get snagged and then where people think you
when
lay
you're
on that
younger,
window.
even just a year is such a large percentage of your life.
Yeah,
so.
now 10 years feels like 1 year, but back then 1 year was definitely 10 years. It felt like a whole epoch. It felt like, in this era, as we can see by the rings on the trees, I was into Ninja Turtles, but then I got it. So this attitude, this crappy attitude, this crapitude was parroted, but not Squawks, because that character's shit. It was parroted by young, impressionable gamers who were reading this stuff then. The younger GameCube generation, who I hold no ill will towards, and they've since come around, like, I'm not trying to turn this into a generational pissing match, like between, the NES or NES and the SNES generations or the N64 generation. No, absolutely not. I'm trying to get to the roots of why there were all of these weird biases on both sides of the spectrum. Donkey Kong Country fans, DK Vine, and the gaming media and other subsets of Nintendo fandom. And I don't know, like, I'm sure you could add some broader perspective into this, since you do have a broader perspective than I do.
I mean, for my part, I was really excited about Jungle Beat. Just because, hey, look, this new interesting Donkey Kong thing. And like you, I had it set in the context of like, oh, there's all this other stuff coming out. But just like, I don't know, I didn't subscribe to as many magazines, and I didn't have a whole lot of online presence at the time, but I did feel the bitter undertones were really odd, because like as a kid, I was right there in the zone. I'm like, well, this is obviously like Donkey Kong's the best thing Nintendo puts out by miles, so why would they be mad at it? I didn't get it. So no, I don't really have any explanation for that either.
Fair enough.
It's just, it was weird to everybody.
Yeah. Talking about broader pop culture, though, I think this is just something that kind of happens, and you don't realize it when you first become an adult. I think we always, and I know I brought this up before, but we always turn on anything that was massively popular a few years after that initial popularity ends. The minute something has completed its run, or it enters a period of slight hibernation, I think the knives sort of come out, and society at large either disassociates itself from it, or they start making fun of it, or they start nitpicking it, or why did we ever like this? We were fools. This is garbage. This new thing is so much better. We see that all the time in pop culture, and it's not until the people who grew up with that thing, when they come of age and nostalgia kicks in for that era, that it really has any chance of successfully coming back and getting the respect it probably honestly deserved all along. You know, they say you only live twice, but I'm old enough to have seen this cycle kind of repeat itself a few times in my lifetime now, and it was most painful, obviously, experiencing it with Donkey Kong Country and Rare, because that was the defining thing of my childhood. All of these other interests I had, pop culture wise, you know, I liked the Ghostbusters, and it's still my favorite movie of all time, but, you know, I liked the cartoon, and then I liked the Ninja Turtles, and, you know, I kept moving on, but Donkey Kong, when I got to that was all of a sudden, as it was with, you know, as a video game franchise, all of a sudden that was just this thing that, oh my God, this is what I've been waiting for. This is what I've been looking for. This fills this emptiness in the little part of my soul that needs filling with something nonsensical and ridiculous. This is exactly like my pop culture soulmate right here. And so to have that happen with Donkey Kong Country right when I was becoming quote unquote an adult, because your brain doesn't stop developing until you're like 25, and even then you don't really start figuring shit out until you're well into your 30s,
or so they tell me.
Well, it's true. I feel like I'm only now just figuring shit out. It took me a while.
Yeah, definitely. Now that I'm into my 30s.
They say, but you're an adult when you're 18. Not really the case, especially in this day and age. We don't expect people to grow up nearly as fast as we once do, which is a good thing because people aren't done growing. We're never done growing, but, you either keep evolving as a person, or you see yourself become a cranky Kong in old age. And I do not want to become a cranky Kong. I want to keep broadening my perspectives, becoming a better person. I want to stay Diddy and Dixie, even if I get to the age the cranky's at. I still want to be youthful in spirit and doing cartwheels and spinning my non-existent ponytail.
And I'm just over here looking for a nice stick to beat people with.
I mean, if I have to beat people with a stick, I'll do it. Don't get me wrong. Yeah, so childhood itself, though, I'm getting really deep into a rabbit hole here. Apologies. Childhood is a funny thing, Gibbon, because, those of us who are fortunate to have relatively comfortable, stable childhoods without any problems, those of us who are able to just live this comfortable, idyllic life as a kid, when you become an adult, that sucks. Because all of a sudden, you enter your 20s, and you're expected to make something of yourself. Taxes? What the fuck? Wait, insurance? Wait, what's this? What are all, what's an IRA? What are you talking about? I don't have money. What?
Yeah.
No, I'm not going to invest it. Invest it in what? That sounds made up. You're making things up now.
And then you realize everyone's just making things up.
Yeah.
Even your parents.
It's all just societal constructs. It's all bullshit. And I think once I realized that, I got a lot happier with myself and who I was. And I was like, sure, I'll make a career out of Donkey Kong journalism. Absolutely. Because fuck society. I'm going to blaze my own trail.
Yeah.
So.
And I thank you for it.
There are great aspects to being an adult. Don't get me wrong. Drinking, driving. or in the other reverse order that. You don't want to do that in that order.
Yeah. We knew what you meant.
Being
there
an
was
adult,
a comma there.
Being an adult is actually a good thing, but our happiest memories are undoubtedly because through the rosy glasses of nostalgia, it's when we're a kid, when you didn't have too much in the way of responsibility, when, you get to just live in a world of make-believe. And I think part of the reason so many adults are miserable pieces of shit is because they get away. They tell themselves, I have to give that up. And when they do, they become heinous, atrocious drains on our planet. So never
I guess I was fortunate in that respect that I was sort of an outsider as a kid anyway, so I didn't really have any extra worries about people judging what I was doing because they were already judging what I was doing. so it was whatever.
I mean, I was an outsider too. I mean,
No, I mean, like, there were dents in the wall from them beating my head into it, sort of outsider.
I was only an outsider in that, I was shy and I hid myself away, but, I still never felt like I belonged, and when you have those happy childhood memories of, summers off and playing video games and playing outside and going on all sorts of adventures and then all of a sudden you become
childhood.
When you become an adult and then society is all of a sudden saying, hey, those things you really liked as a kid, they're actually terrible. Let me tell you why. And oh yeah, my childhood is great. Yours is wrong. You had a wrong childhood. Then that's a really hard thing to accept when you don't even want to grow up, when you're clinging to your childhood as best you can, and society is telling you to stop, and then society is also telling you that your entire worldview up until this point was incorrect. That's a hard thing to process. And so I think in retrospect, that's kind of what we were going through on DK Vine at the time. There was a struggle, and we were kind of locked away in our little clubhouse trying to weather the storm of all of this dissenting opinion, all of these anxieties about aging, that all of this depression and angst about supposedly trying to actually go out in the world and be adults. That was all being projected on this drama with Jungle Beat.
Yeah. I can see that.
Yeah. And, we all know how the history eventually went. Jungle Beat came out. It got good reviews. And it got a lot of ecstatic reviews. But
it went over fairly well with the general public.
It did. I don't think it really set the world on fire sales-wise. I think it did all right for itself. Not maybe what Nintendo would have liked. I think part of the problem was it was tied to the bongos. And, you had to, it came bundled with the bongos, and I think you could also buy it separately if you already had the bongos, but that's requiring a whole lot of commitment from people when they see this big box, and it's just like, I have to play with bongos. It was a hard sell as it is. Meanwhile, the Game Boy Advance remakes of Donkey Kong Country, they comparatively did very well for themselves, I think, on the budget they were made on, and, they sold very well. Diddy Kong eventually made it into Super Smash Bros. Brawl, and that was the moment that there was no more questioning from people about whether or not he belonged. Diddy Kong, that's Rare's character. He's not in Jungle Beat. He doesn't belong. Well, all of a sudden there's Diddy, and Smash is the kingmaker, as I say. It anointed Diddy as a chosen Nintendo character. For the longest time, he was the only Western-developed character in Smash Brothers, which is so crazy to think about. And now there are only 3, and another one is another rare character, so it's,
yeah, it's kind of a big deal.
And then the other one, it's a retro character, so it's all in the family anyway, yeah.
Actually, interestingly, aside from Rare, pretty much every other studio that's handled Donkey Kong outside of like core Nintendo has also handled has also handled Metroid. they've done both Metroid and Donkey Kong.
Yeah,
like
great.
NST had Hunters and the Mario vs. Donkey Kong series. Retro has done Metroid Prime and Donkey Kong Country Returns, obviously. There was... I've completely forgotten the studio. Has slipped my mind. But there was a studio that was working on a Metroid pitch that was also working on some Donkey Kong stuff at one point. I guess Pion is an exception to that as well, but it's weird how often the two go hand in hand.
Yeah.
So,
and then, you know, you look back in 1994 where both franchises had one of their biggest peaks with Super Metroid and Donkey Kong Country same year. It's weird how linked they are. Not linked as in the Zelda character, but...
Yeah, Super Metroid and Donkey Kong Country were both sort of the, like, look, we can do mature, awesome hype stuff as well. Yeah. Which was, of course, a response to Sega's Sonic doing the, look, we're more grown up than Mario.
We're extreme!
Sega does what Nintendo don't, and they came back with, Super Metroid and Donkey Kong Country.
You want to talk about childhood anxieties? I have to admit the Sega Genesis commercials pissed me off to no end as a kid, because I felt like it was a direct attack on me, because I was a Nintendo kid, I had a Super Nintendo, and here's Sega Genesis telling me I suck, and I'm not cool, because I don't have the cool system. And I have to admit, I got a little smug when Donkey Kong Country came out, and I was just like, yeah, that's right, What now, huh? Vector Man, fuck you.
History agrees with you.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, Diddy was established from that point on, and then in 2010, we listened, we could hear it coming. Donkey Kong Country Returns, which was exactly where I predicted Donkey Kong would go back in September 2002. It just took us 8 years or so to get there, but I was eventually right. Then Tropical Freeze was announced in 2013. Dixie's back, Funky's in the game, Playable Cranky, and David fucking Wise doing the soundtrack.
Oh, God.
Like, that was such a happy moment. Like,
beautiful.
I remember, like, the euphoria of Returns meant so much for our community, but Tropical Freeze, it didn't mean as much initially until David Wise wasn't, like, later that day was when everything went Nova, and we just went, oh my God, David Wise. Doesn't even matter if the Kremlings aren't in it. Who cares? David Wise. And
the remix of Lockjaw's Locker, I think I just had that on repeat for like 6 hours.
And of course, Tropical Freeze had that backlash, should have been Metroid, and then that kind of brought back reopened some wounds that had somehow not healed completely, but history has bared us out on Tropical Freeze as well, with the Switch version and the critical reevaluation. And then, of course, K. Rool, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Nintendo's got, apparently, big plans for Donkey Kong. We've got a Rare Renaissance that we're in the middle of. Everyone's been singing the praises of Rare's classic games again. Playtonic is here and thriving and has a solid fan base. And then now Rare has their biggest success in years with Sea of Thieves, which is also getting the critical kudos that it was lacking its first year. So, I mean, we won. Essentially,
it's a good time for us.
Essentially, DK Vine won. All of that turmoil, all of that hand-wringing, all of the so-called declarations of war that were being waged on us, it's a war that we were victorious in. And we didn't really compose ourselves the best way on the battlefield at all times. But I think now, going forward, for the rest of our lives and whatever comes beyond, we'll hopefully have the hindsight now to appropriately judge situations that might have given us panic in the past and say, well, okay, yes, but remember, this is the way these things usually go. And so, hey, maybe don't curse anybody or send them threatening letters. I don't think we ever did that. The latter, we definitely curse people, but please be respectful of the creators and understand their viewpoint. The problem, though, Gibbon, is that we didn't understand the creator's viewpoint because we were not
Yeah.
getting their correct viewpoint. But okay.
It's taken a long time to get some context on that.
Yes. So I'm not going to apologize entirely for how we behaved because we were young, we were dumb, and we were full of misconceptions about how things worked back then. And, we needed a place to vent. We got one. And it was cathartic for us. It helped us through it. We could have turned to some, bad crowds to help get our anger out. We could have, could have been like West Side Story. We could have been joined dancing and singing gangs, but we didn't. We stayed online and we whined. And I think, all things considered, that was the least bad scenario that we could have taken out of all the bad scenarios. And, even during that time, even before the truth about this interview came out, I had come to respect Koizumi and his philosophies and his games. And I even thought he had come around on his opinion on Donkey Kong Country, because all of those references in Super Mario Odyssey, those loving references, even if he spelled Radley wrong, I just pointed out on Twitter that Rare spelled Radley wrong in Banjo-Kazooie when it was a trivia question in Grunny's Furnace Fun. And I said, it can be viewed as a running joke that when other parties try to pay Radley respect, they botch his name. Hey, it's a running joke. Banjo-Kazooie and Super Mario Odyssey. Who's going to botch it next?
Yeah, and even we found out somewhat recently, but still decently a ways back, that he'd wanted to put Donkey Kong and maybe some Jungle Beat stuff in the Mario Galaxy games, but had been vetoed in there. But there's still dummied out DK models and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think having Jungle Beat characters in Galaxy would have soothed any burns at the time.
Oh no, but he wanted to have DK in too. I'm convinced that weird monkey NPC who conducts the races was where DK was going to be.
Yeah, but even when he finally got around to incorporating Donkey Kong in a Mario game, it was done in a much more respectful way than I think would have been warranted. He was very conscientious about how to do it, and he did it in a way that wasn't just shoehorning Donkey Kong into a Mario game. It played to their shared history together, and it played also to what Donkey Kong has gone on to be, independent of Jumpman and Pauline. But it also, it didn't just, let's just stick Donkey Kong in here. The way they did it was clever, and it still has this debating about whether or not it counts as an appearance of the modern Donkey Kong. We'll get to that Tribunal episode eventually, people. But it was done in a way that was entirely tastefully, respectfully done. And that really, made me respect Koizumi. And I was I basically forgave him for what he said back in 2004, 2005. Funny story, though.
Yeah.
A month ago, Super Mario Wiki's Twitter feed, they ran a tweet about the infamous Koizumi quote, the "not fresh enough for today" quote. I did one of those last autumn on DK Vine's Twitter feed. We have a lot of cross-pollination with the content we run. Occasionally things will get doubled up. I'm not saying they were we're going to do that tweet that DK Vine did, because I'm sure I did a tweet that Super Mario Broth did, a year or two back. And it happens. It's great. And it keeps this stuff in the public discussion. And it's a good thing they ran it too. So, because the guy I founded DK Vine with, Chad, he replied to it, and he wondered if any fluent Japanese speakers had actually ever seen the original text of this interview. And so that kind of got some gears churning very quickly on a weekday morning. And Glow Squid, who usually runs the Super Mario Wiki Twitter account, actually found the text, recovered it, and a few different people then got to work on doing their own translations of it.
Yeah.
Apart from what Anthony J.C. did for Insider more than 14 years ago. And, if you can't trust somebody with the name J.C., then I feel the Abrahamic faith are just going to fall apart, because come on, the guy can walk on water, but he can't translate basic Japanese. So we got a couple different cracks at this. One of DK Vine's informants, actually, not Dave Throat. For those of you who are thinking, oh, Dave Throat, this is not Dave Throat. This is an awesome guy named Johnny Kong, and he sent in a lot of info and footage from around the world to me over the last couple of years, and I'm very appreciative of that. But he actually translated it, and he found that it said, according to him, the following, and there's no precise translation of this, so we have a couple of different interpretations, but they all run along the same lines, and they all are very, very different from the N-Cider translation that IGN ran, and IGN still has on their site as a story to this day.
Of course.
So, Johnny Kong's translation has Koizumi saying the following. With the exception of the characters, Donkey Kong and the bananas, everything is original. I thought this was for the best, as it became apparent the new production was uncharacteristic/unbefitting of conventional/traditional Donkey Kong. I think I was uncertain of my ability to put out/show/reveal Tokyo Production Department's personality, (colors). So, you get words that could have multiple different meanings in English. So he hedged his bets there. But this was then followed up by another Super Mario wikier by the name of Charon, who gave their own spin on the translation. I realize this is really small in our notes, so I'll just read it. The reason is, aside from Donkey Kong and the banana, at least we still get a little nod to the banana there, all characters are original. Think of it as a completely new work with a personality uncharacteristic of previous Donkey Kong games. I wonder if you can see how the Tokyo Production Department's personality comes out in the game. Or something like that, Charon says. Then we actually got a third translation, this time from Source Gaming, whose entire reason for being is translating. So, would you want to read this? Because I feel like this is actually probably the closest of the three to what he was saying.
Sure. With the exception of Bananas and Donkey Kong, all the characters in Donkey Kong Jungle Beat are original characters. It has elements that aren't like what DK has been up to at this point, so it might be best to think of it as a completely new game. I hope that Nintendo EAD Tokyo was able to leave their own mark in the game. And yeah, a lot more composed and respectful than what was said back in the day.
Yeah, it kind of a mild, honestly sensible statement.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's like he didn't even have a problem with the rare characters at all, and I feel like absolutely awful about this.
Where did that fresh thing even come from?
We'll get there. So obviously, I don't think Koizumi knows of DK Vine. I certainly hope he doesn't, at least at this point. I don't think he's really aware of the English side of the community in general, the English-speaking side. And I certainly hope he's never been made aware of how those in the West interpreted his words for so many years. But I would still, at the very least, like to apologize to him. I don't think he cares what happens on the Kongversation. I don't think he's ever going to hear this, but I want to put that out there. I've already done it on the site itself, but on the Kongversation itself, I am so sorry, Mr. Koizumi. This is just me apologizing to thin air, but I feel like complete shit. And, and I said, I don't feel like I need to apologize for how I was feeling at the time. And I don't, because we were made to feel a certain way. But
given the information that you had available to you. That's
so unfair to Koizumi. Like, that is just the shittiest thing. It's much easier in 2019 to source this stuff. we have social media. Everything is a lot more instantaneous. Back in the day, we had forums, we had AOL Instant Messenger, MySpace was like just starting out. But if you really wanted to connect with somebody, you had to know them or you had to meet them somewhere. You didn't have these huge resources where, you have a Twitter account, you tweet something, somebody says something, other people get on it, it's done. That kind of groundwork, detective journalism, just completely, independent of what the major sites were doing. You didn't have that back in 2005. And, I'm not a fluent speaker of anything but English. I'm hoping to better myself in that regard. I took 5 years of Spanish between high school and college, and I can't speak a word of it because my teachers were horrible, but I would like to, eventually learn several foreign languages, but I didn't know any Japanese speakers in 2004. And that's kind of funny because later that year, I would start working with Chad for writing for the TV station NTTV. And eventually Jeremy Thorne would come into our orbit, who is a fluent Japanese speaker. He taught English in Japan, did his Smashed Update series famously back when Super Smash Bros. Brawl was out in Japan, but still not out in the rest of the world. Remember when we had those huge gulfs of time when a game would come out and we would have to wait months for it to come out everywhere else?
Yeah.
Like, that's just crazy. Like, that was just a decade ago. How far we've come as a global culture since then. But, yeah, he was a frequent collaborator of ours, but even when he started working, it was so weird because he was like at the TV station we were doing our show for, and then like we all like after we finished the show and we won an Emmy, then Jeremy like stayed in our orbit and he got interested in DK Vine, and he like for a couple of years was hanging around DK Vine doing shit for that. That's just so weird. And then Banks Lee, who was an actor on our TV show, eventually started working for Attractions magazine, and now he's like friends with the Lobo Destroyo guys, independent of DK Vine. And it's just such a small world how like everything
really is.
loops back together, and it becomes smaller every day. And I think that's a good thing, but that's just me. So anyway, 2005, 2004, it was harder to source these things. And yeah, we took it on faith what IGN was talking about because, we trusted IGN. They had clout even back then that they were the biggest online video game news source. So if they put this article up, we were going to believe it. That's on us for taking that at blind faith, but I'm also not going to entirely say I'm sorry because it's on them, and I don't think they've issued any apologies about this since the truth came out. So, anyway, Jesus, IGN, like Jesus. Not JC, not Anthony JC. I'm talking about the other dude. Anyway, so I have a theory. I saw the Kremlin campaigners have a theory that this translation from Insider, and Insider's long defunct, so we're basically throwing stones at a grave right now. So I don't want to cast any aspersions on them that aren't there because I'm done doing that, especially on this topic, but they also don't exist anymore. So whatever. I'm not really like rocking any boats here by like saying, hey, what were you up to? Because they're dead. DK Vine outlasted an IGN affiliate. So, no, I think, and they think, and it feels like a pretty solid theory that this translation was deliberately twisted to be as hostile and antagonistic towards Donkey Kong Country as possible. Not to rile up the fan base of Donkey Kong Country, but to further pour salt on the wounds that the Nintendo fan base was feeling, the animosity they were feeling. It was done to say, yeah, that's trash. Rare's characters are trash. This is a much better direction. Because you look at this translation, how it's really translated. You look at the way they translated it. There is no way to get from point A to point Q or whatever point they were at. Like, it's so far...
Point A to point not fresh enough.
Yeah, it's so completely...
Like, I generally like to give people the benefit of the doubt and be like, well, maybe they were just letting those bitter feelings influence how they were translating stuff. But there's definitely been some liberties taken with the localization of this interview.
Like, not even liberties. It's just it kind of reminds me a little bit like, if this was their intention, and I can't, like, again, we don't want to ascribe motive where we can't, but it kind of reminds me of the way certain foreign governments are, like, trying to influence social media in the US and Canada and the UK, and basically, like,
you'll get the site dust again.
Yeah, no. Don't want to do that, which is why I'm being vague, and nobody will know what I'm talking about. But the way they're trying to influence opinion by riling up passions that already exist and making them worse. And I feel like that's what this interview was. We essentially got like targeted by some sort of, like, Ukrainian content farm, but, you know, a completely different context here. That's what happened back in 2005. I feel bad about that. I feel terrible for Koizumi because we raked him over the coals for so long because we were pissed. And I think if this were true, we would have a reason to be pissed at the time. And even though I was able to eventually forgive him, which is, like, I don't even like saying that because it feels like there's something to have to forgive in the first place. But even though I was able to make peace with him and even come around on his game, I you know, that still kind of angered me. And to have it be fake, to have it be false, I feel like a fool, but it just makes me more angry towards the people who translated it to begin with.
Yeah.
But hey, you know what? They didn't succeed because not only is this beef, this feud between Nintendo loyalists and Donkey Kong Country fans, that's in the past now. Like, everybody has kind of kissed and made up. And hey, Donkey Kong Country is still here. The characters are still here. Rare is still here. Playtonic is here. We came out of it intact, and Insider is not here, so you know what? Whatever. The thing is, Gibbon, most of us like Jungle Beat 2 now.
Which is awesome. I love that everyone actually likes and enjoys the game now.
So let's talk a little bit about Jungle Beat. I feel like this episode has just been working down that steel wool and trying to get my soul as clean as possible. And it's still going to bear these marks for a long, long time. But I feel like I'm emotionally spent right now. So maybe we should just talk about video games for the remainder of the podcast. And let's talk about Jungle Beat. So,
what a concept.
Yeah. Now, let's not have a broad overarching discussion because we've done that, or I tried to do that back in the Spotlight episode. But I do want to talk about how I came to love Jungle Beat. I want to talk about your experiences with Jungle Beat. And I want to talk about how it was way before April 2019 that I actually came around on Jungle Beat. It has nothing to do with finding out this interview was falsified. It has everything to do with me actually playing it. And before I go, why don't you talk about your experiences with Jungle? Because this whole episode I've just been saying, and then on DK Vine, we felt bad. And then we acted this way. And then this happened. And we were sad. What about you? What about you, Gibbon? What are your experiences with Jungle Beat?
Well, to start off with DK Vine and split off from there a little bit, Jungle Beat coming out was... I was aware of DK Vine as a site. I'd come here looking at, like, the enemy lists and stuff. Since I didn't have the old Nintendo Power Guides for the Donkey Kong Country games and stuff myself, my boyfriend at the time had those. So if I wanted to look stuff up, I had to go to DK Vine, basically, to look at all your lists and articles and whatnot. And so when Jungle Beat came out, I was super excited. This new Donkey Kong game. Look at these cool bongo things. This game rocks. I'm going to go and take a look at that forum thing and talk about this game I love with everyone else who must love this game. And that's why I didn't join the community for about half a decade afterwards.
Probably for the best. Like, if I'm honest, you waited it out. And honestly, like, you probably shouldn't have joined until this year. Like, it's taken a while, you know? It's taken a while to course correct.
No, I eventually created an account sort of surrounding the hype around returns. And I'm glad I did. Y'all are great.
Oh,
but
thanks.
that initial exposure to just the Jungle Beat topic, which was near the top of the forum at the time because it was hot on everyone's lips, was just not a great first introduction to the community.
Yeah, I remember a lot of people thought, why does this Donkey Kong site hate Donkey Kong so much? Or why does this Donkey Kong site hate Nintendo so much? Like, nobody could understand or perceive the weird shell we had formed around ourselves.
Mm-hmm. As far as Jungle Beat goes, like, it was a Donkey Kong game. I love it. I love pretty much every Donkey Kong game. I played the heck out of it. I made my hands so sore. I'm pretty sure the bongos don't work as well as they used to. But I still have them. I still have that original pair. Not physically at the moment, because Courtney is borrowing them. She recently streamed Jungle Beat, and that was my copy that I sent over to her to play. But yeah, I like it, and I've always had a fond spot for it, just because of its weird out-there-ness and sort of bringing some overtly Asian stuff over to, like, the Donkey Kong Country formula.
Yeah.
And then in around 2012, a member of the forum, Manfrog, who I believe goes by Professor Borp over in the Mario wiki circles these days, was doing a series of forum topics where he would translate the Japanese, like, manuals and guides for the Donkey Kong Country games and just point out things that were different, because unlike most series, Donkey Kong Country originated in the West and then got translated into Japanese. So he was kind of making notes on how it had been translated into Japanese in a weird reversal of the norm, and just seeing what was different there. And it inspired me to import the official Jungle Beat guide and do a bunch of scans and translate it, because I had come to find out that it has a full enemy list as well as some other stuff in there.
And we never got any of this outside of Japan.
Yeah, we had some official names just from context, like there were some stickers and trophies in Smash Bros.
Right,
and
but
the Wii New Play Control version website name-checked some enemies that we didn't know the names of before, weirdly enough.
But we never got, like, guides. And even, like, the instruction manual was really, like, stripped down of any context for any of the stuff.
I think this was one of the first games where the manual was, like, just a fold-out, actually.
Oh, yeah.
And it was really bare bones over here. Like, there was a line on the box that was like, "Help Donkey Kong become the King of Kings," and that was about it.
The King of Kings, Anthony J.C.
Yeah, I'm sensing a theme.
There was also, I remember this, I guess it was a wallpaper. You remember the wallpapers you used to get on sites that you could put in the back? Like, and I can't even think of it because it was so small, because, you know, monitors have both shrunk and expanded. But it was this picture of what we at DK Vine called the Kiss Kongs, because for some reason we thought the four baddie Kongs that are bosses in the game resembled band members of Kiss, because I guess their hair
I can sort of see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
They had some of the weird, like, Nintendo had a weird sort of aesthetic going on for this game. So while it brought in a lot of Asian influences and stuff, the marketing and stuff for the game all went for a weird sort of, like, tribal tattoos and graffiti sort of look.
Well,
which is why you went from
tribal tattoos were very popular at the time.
Even Mario had one.
But yeah, this wallpaper had those Kongs, and it had Donkey Kong on it, or maybe it didn't have Donkey Kong on it, but it said in big bold letters at the top, "Who will stop the tyranny?" And I was like, the tyranny of what? I don't know the story of this game.
So getting to that, in the process of translating enemy names, which was kind of neat because it's gave us names for all the enemies for one thing. And Mario Wiki actually contacted me after I'd finished with my thread, asking if they could use the scans I had made and jot down the names of some of the enemies they didn't know the names of and stuff. So that was cool in that respect. So some of their official information on the wiki comes from my work in that thread. But I, for the hell of it, went and looked at the original names of all the levels and just went through and sort of translated here and there sort of notes that were in the level descriptions, because they'd have the map of the level and hey, do this thing here and do this thing here and there's a secret over here and yada yada, all the guide stuff. But they'd, like most guides, have little oh, here's a neat little trivia fact, or here's this little lore snippet sort of thing in the edges, just like American guides do. So there was lots of little stuff oh, those little black poofball enemies with the weird jack-o'-lantern looking faces, they're corrupted tree spirits for instance, or this thing over here and this thing over here. And so looking at the original level names, which clarify some stuff, oh, in the English version this level is something something ruins, but in the Japanese version the name specifically says that this is a handen, which is the shrine part of a Shinto shrine, and within the context of the levels around it you can kind of go, oh, this must be a shrine to the moon that is associated with this sacred tree that's so prominent in the game.
Yes.
And just looking at that sort of thing,
and it's so funny.
Of,
it's so funny you say that, because we were not provided any of this context.
Yeah,
and
none of this context existed for the West.
And it's such a Japanese centric game, and it's in its lore and its spirituality, that the not having any of the context for the culture behind it, or what they were trying to say with the game. It was basically, I was just left to try to interpret the story the best I could as I played it. And it was basically, I got the part about the sacred tree, obviously. And then there's something about Kongs who made themselves hybrids with trees to supplant the sacred tree. And then you've got ancient aliens in there too, and what? You
were actually right about that part.
The dragons, the dragon tubes, are they supposed to be ancient alien tubes?
They're involved with that. There is actually some ancient alien stuff going on there.
Can't believe I got that right.
The levels in the game is the ancient foundry.
Yes.
And that's the sort of Inca-looking thing where it's the imagery often associated with ancient alien stuff. In Japanese, that's called the Alien Foundry. And it's explicitly having to do with...
Why would they change that?
Yeah. And so, along with that and some other contextual stuff, you kind of get the impression that it's not super uncommon in Japanese stuff to have Onis and whatnot in there, and Cactus King, or Final Kong as he's called in Japanese, sort of has the look of a not traditional Japanese Oni, but he's got the big Oni thing going on. He's got the feathery hair, the feathery willowy hair. He's got the pale skin and sort of the feather shoulder stuff going on.
See, if I never saw a Cactus King, it just sounds like you're describing Rod Stewart.
I know, right?
Why is Rod Stewart teaming up with Kiss? This makes no sense.
I have also no idea why they called him Cactus King in the localization. There's so much that was just lost in translation or just translated very loosely here.
Did Anthony J.C. do the localization for the game?
But there's sort of a we'll go with trope of sort of Oni and mythological sort of kami spirits or whatnot being actual alien entities in Japan. So you basically have this Oni demon, Final Kong, coming down from the heavens at some indeterminate time in the past. He created this foundry. He started making things and attacking stuff. He was eventually sealed away and broke out sometime recently, hence that like broken out of egg area in the ancient foundry, and has started using this tar stuff to mind control the inhabitants of the area, and has been sending it out via the rocks. The rocks being the giant birds and the only bosses in the game that die when they're defeated, and those eggs they're lugging around are the sources of the tar that is possessing everybody.
What the hell?
Yeah.
So literally you're telling me that there's the black oil from the X-Files in Donkey Kong Jungle Beat.
Yeah, he's using this tar to possess people. It's what the elephant tanks run off of that are being produced in the ancient foundry. It's still a very Donkey Kong nature versus industry, but it's a very Japanese take on nature versus industry, with like the Shinto spiritual tree and the helper monkeys asking Donkey Kong to come in and help them liberate themselves from Final Kong's influence, because he's been using black oil and industry to take over the countryside.
So, well, yeah, that's definitely a story, which is more than what we got, which was no context whatsoever. And there was even like this interview, I think it was with Koizumi, where it was translated as him saying there doesn't need to be a story. It's just Donkey Kong wanting to get all the bananas and prove he's the best, or something like that.
I mean, I think that was more in response to sort of the way Rare would have, like 3 or 4 pages of story in their manuals and stuff. And
then Cranky Kong in the margins complaining about the story.
Yeah. Like that sort of story doesn't exist even in the guidebook. This is all just sort of contextual, knowing all of these sort of cultural footnotes and looking at the level names and how they kind of tell a story with where DK is traveling to next and what's going on there and whatnot. Like, the first level after your first fight with Cactus King is a celebration. He's at the beach, he's racing around with these turtles and stuff, and then the boss of that kingdom is Gloat Pig, Gloat Hog. He's come back to go, hey, you're not done yet. That's sort of just putting puzzle pieces together and puzzling out the narrative.
I mean, I tried to puzzle out the narrative as best I could, but without context, it was Kong scientists fuse themselves with plant genetics to try to supplant the sacred tree, which determines the leadership of these islands. But I got the ancient alien part right. I just didn't make the connection with what we know as Cactus and Ghastly King, because they separated them into 2 characters.
It's more explicit in Japan that's Final Kong and then Final Kong Resurrected, or Final Kong not quite dead yet.
Yeah.
Because in that second fight, he's using like ghost fire attacks and stuff, and he's definitely like he's got more of a deathly aura around him.
Yeah. Well, that would be context that would have been greatly appreciated. Although, who knows, we might not have appreciated it at the time because, it's too Japanese. And now I'm like, I kind of love that Donkey Kong has been developed by developers in Japan, in the UK, in the US. Like, I like that we have different styles of Donkey Kong, different perspectives, but all ostensibly part of the same world. And, I can appreciate that now, but especially like post-Rare. Honestly, like retro immediately post-Rare, I would have been like, this is too American. Like, where's all the weird references I don't understand? I hate this. I would have been very hard to please no matter what. But yeah, it's a shame they've stripped out so much of that story.
Yeah.
And because I like, why would they do that? Like, it's baked into the game so much that you can't divorce it from it. But
yeah, and even some like seemingly innocuous localization choices, like just calling him Cactus King. It's like, why? That removes what little context there was.
Well, hence him being a scientist Kong who fused himself with plant DNA, and then he, like a Swamp Thing villain, and then he even
knowing that, like, the big black enemies that send out, like, the black combo fairies at you were called, like, the Tar Men, and knowing that, like, oh, you can kind of make the connection there with Final Kong's area is this mushroom cavern, and mushrooms cause decay and break stuff down into tar. Like, yeah.
Yeah, well, I didn't get any... Well, I got some of it, but I didn't get any of that when I first played it, so
this is the kind of obsessive time we waste over at DK Girder, going into in-depth analysis like this.
I mean, we do
much
the same
like
thing.
DK Vine does.
Yeah, we do the same thing at DK Vine, just, from different areas of expertise. I talk about, the inhabitants of Pantsland, and, if Mr. Pants has been knighted yet, and I think he should be. I think it's outrageous he hasn't been. But we haven't had any reference to Sir Pants, so... Like,
obviously, the people who sealed away Final Kong in the years of yore was the Kremling Empire that the Kongs from space had come down and subjugated, thus being the origin of the Kong species on Earth.
Well, or we could say that it was Tiki Tong from Tiki Tong's dimension that the Golden Temple sends you to. And then he was the one.
Oh, that's another thing. Some of Retro's extra levels with fruits and stuff in the sky make this similar stuff in Jungle Beat look tame.
Yeah. Yeah, but I could accept it in Donkey Kong Country Returns because it was a separate dimension. So I'm like, yeah, whatever, weird shit can happen. Fuck it. Yeah. So I first tried Jungle Beat in a store kiosk. And I hated it. And, because, your first experience with a game, honestly, it should never be standing up in the middle of a fluorescent lighting lit, like, GameStop while other people are standing nearby and you're self-consciously slamming some bongo drums that are fastened to this like, steel structure. That's not an ideal way to first experience any video game, let alone Donkey Kong Jungle Beat. And Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, like, looking at videos of it, it looked bombastic, it looked loud, it looked obnoxious, there were, like, sirens blaring, you could barely even hear the music, it was go, go, go. It was just, to me, as a Donkey Kong Country fan who appreciated the serenity of Stickerbush Symphony, this was just disgusting. And then I actually got around to playing it way too late, but I got around to playing it when I was doing my Slush Funds series for the DK Vine
I remember
forum.
Following along that thread. It was hilarious.
And you can kind of see as that thread goes along, where I go from this completely antagonistic viewpoint to actually getting into it. You can kind of see, like, the giddiness start to build. The
point where you just gave up trying to understand and you were just like, fuck it, this is weird.
I'll figure it out later. I'll figure it out later. But, so after we came back to DK Vine full time, after becoming failed screenwriters, Emmy-winning screenwriters, but failed nonetheless, I decided, I need to play catch up because I'd been, flitting in and out of DK Vine, for most of the last few years, but I had really stopped playing the games that I had been. I think it was Mario Kart Double Dash that I had just given up on, and then from then on, I just kind of played games as they came out if they struck my interest. So, like, the big rare titles, I would play, but I stopped trying to obsessively beat every Donkey Kong Universe game in chronological order. And so I was like, let me get back to that. So I beat Double Dash. I started, like, ticking off the boxes one by one. And then I got to Jungle Beat. And, of course, this all derailed when I got to Donkey Konga 2, the worst Donkey Kong game ever made. And I don't care how much I've matured or how much my opinion has shifted. Fuck you, Donkey Konga 2. But going back to Jungle Beat, I even took a picture of me like giving it the finger before I unboxed it, because I had it and it was still in the box. I hadn't even unboxed it, and this was what 2011 at this point. I don't know.
You could have made some decent money on that.
No. Like even a Donkey Kong game that I supposedly hate, if I have it, I am not going to part with it. So
good man.
No, I don't believe in reselling games. I'm like, you keep them, you buy it, it's part of your library. I don't like the whole culture of playing and discarding. I feel like this is something that a lot of people put a lot of hard work into, and even if you're not going to play this again, you almost owe it to yourself to keep it because you never know.
As a game developer in the professional industry, thank you.
But anyway, yeah, and I played it, and the funniest thing happened. Granted, this was post Donkey Kong Country Returns, so I was no longer worried about the direction of the franchise. Still worried about things like, are they going to bring back all of the characters, or are we just stuck with Donkey, Diddy, Cranky, Rambi, and Squawks? Is this like it? There was still uncertainty, but the pressure was off. Kind of like, you had, I don't know, you threw out your back and you got like some of your mobility back, but you're still kind of hobbling about. That was where we were. So that was a weird analogy. I don't know why my mind went there. So as I played it, I started to understand it. I started to understand that, hey, no, this isn't just a platforming game that arbitrarily uses the bongos. This is a rhythm game that just happens to be a platformer. And the bongos are kind of essential to that feeling. And it's all about finding the rhythm of nature, sort of. And I don't know if that's actually in the real plot, but that's the way I interpreted it. It's Donkey Kong going through these natural elements, environments, and like feeling the rhythm of the forest, the jungle beat. And so you got that, and then all of a sudden, all of those obnoxious little sound effects that I mentioned, they actually aid you. They actually pump you up as your combos increase. And this is completely contrary to Donkey Kong Country's style of gameplay, which isn't about combos. It isn't about scores. Anything you do or collect immediately scrolls off the screen because it's all about the immersive atmosphere of it. But then Donkey Kong Jungle Beat isn't a Donkey Kong Country game. Koizumi made that abundantly clear in the interview that was mistranslated. We just didn't know it, So It wasn't that he was trying to replace Donkey Kong Country. It was that he was trying to do something different. And yeah, playing that and playing it in the context post Donkey Kong Country Returns, before we knew about the mistranslated interview being mistranslated and it just being just all these misconceptions. But even then, I was like, oh my God, this is a fun game. And I remember having a discussion a little bit later. This might have been 2012 or 2000. No, it was 2012, I think, with Ben Cosmina, who was original generation DK Vine writer, about Donkey Kong Country Returns and Donkey Kong Jungle Beat. And, as much as I love Donkey Kong Country Returns, I said, it's weird. I think I almost had more fun with Jungle Beat. And I don't think I've ever publicly divulged me saying that on the Kongversation on DK. I know. And look, I love Returns and I love Tropical Freeze. But honestly, at the time, Jungle Beat was so unlike anything I had played. And of course, I want Diddy. And of course, I want Cranky. And of course, I want Dixie. And of course, I want K. Rool. And the Animal Buddies, all of them. But yeah, Jungle Beat was so much fun.
Yeah, it's just a fun game.
It is, yeah. And I think, like I said, just watching videos of it doesn't do it justice. It's a game you have to feel to understand. And we might disagree on this, but the new Play Control version, I don't think does it any justice.
You are much more polite about new Play Control than I have ever been in discussions on the forum. I'm pretty famous for hating it and thinking it shouldn't exist.
Okay. I didn't know if you thought, it's not that bad of a game. And it's not a bad game, but I feel like it's like Diddy Kong Racing
the new Play
DS.
Control version is
It's like Diddy Kong
game.
Racing DS with the stylus abundance. Or it's like...
You know what? It's close, yeah. It's that sort of thing.
Or it's like Barrel Blast as it exists by itself.
Yeah.
But the intention was to make it for the bongos. It's just a game that has been cut off from its soul.
If they just changed the control scheme on Jungle Beat for the new Play Control version, I think it'd almost be forgivable. But they made so many other changes that just mess up the gameplay that it's just I would not recommend the new Play Control version to anybody, except possibly in the context of you have already played the GameCube version with the bongos and you're curious to see what they added.
Certainly if you're a completionist and you want to touch upon that, I won't stop you, because I will never stop anybody from trying any game. I'm never going to say don't play a game. But, and at the time we appreciated, they added barrels. They added blast barrels, and that was seen as this big victory at the time.
They added blast barrels and some form of coinage in the traditional DK pickup form.
Yeah, and that's why personally, and I don't know what they say in Japan, Gibbon, but personally in my headcanon, New Play Control Jungle Beat is a separate canonical adventure from OG Jungle Beat, just because I feel like after he liberated what I call the faraway lands, just based on a random Dixie's notes from Donkey Konga 2, and I have to call them something. Actually, in the Japanese, the blurb at the beginning of the Japanese manual, it calls it the Southern Seas. Southern Seas. Well, I do place it further south in the rare archipelago, so
there you go.
Yeah, okay. And I gather that context because there were penguins in the background of one of the stages, and I thought, well, they obviously migrate because South Africa has penguins, and its the tip of Africa and southernmost regions. And then there were other things, like the game came out in the US in March, and there was an autumn stage, so obviously they're in the southern hemisphere.
There's actually some context that makes me think it takes place over the course of a year, because you start out in spring, there's a watermelon festival which traditionally takes place in summer. There's autumn stage later. So yeah.
See, I just assumed it took place over a couple of days during Monkey Fest, of course. New Play Control, I just say, like, that's after Donkey Kong kind of took over and became the king of these lands, and he installed blast barrels, because that's what he does. He that's his version of an infrastructure plan. Like, let's bring in the blast barrels. So
good stuff.
But I find Jungle Beat completely fascinating game, and would I want to see a return to Jungle Beat? Well, Nintendo did patent what looks like bongos for the Switch, and we don't know where, if anything, that's going. But would you like to see another Jungle Beat?
I would. I actually think it's one of the concepts that would be good for mobile. Like the Rayman Jungle Run games do really well on mobile, and that's sort of the same. You could do Jungle Beat in that context as a sort of semi-auto runner with set levels where you're collecting stuff along the way. For console, I definitely think there's room for bringing that back, especially if they've repatented the bongos. Really, Jungle Beat wanted to be an arcade game. Like, that's why Nintendo got in touch with the people who do the Taiko Drum Master stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm really surprised we never actually saw an arcade release come down to it.
We did get like follow-ups that were like medal games.
There are two medallion games, which if you're unfamiliar what those are, they're the ones where you put in the coin and it's got I think they're called coin dozers over here, where you've got the bed of coins and those little like pushing things that can possibly push the tokens into the spill out bin for you to collect. But it's so much more than just that aspect, because there's actually full games going on there, like on digital screens and with little mini game things going on the side. And it's basically just the story of Jungle Beat again, DK traveling through the islands and fighting some of the other Kongs and stuff, but it's presented in a much different fashion across the two follow-up arcade games. So that's neat from a perspective of Donkey Kong coming back to the arcade, but it's not really like a Jungle Beat 2. It's not get the bongos back out of the closet, Agnes. We got another game to play.
Yeah, as much as I love Jungle Beat, and as much as I want the original version of Jungle Beat preserved, and so like I'm all about bringing back the bongos if we can get like Jungle Beat on the Switch, whatever, that's fine. And I would want some sort of follow-up maybe, and I would be okay with Koofer or something, or Orko coming back.
Yeah, I think that's the capacity I'd enjoy the most, is just bringing back some of the characters.
Incorporating them into the broader tapestry.
Like the Capuchins, the helper monkeys, they would be a wonderful little like Toad analog sort of thing for just generic inhabitant of the world. Like you said, bringing back some of the animal buddies from the game, or some of the boss characters, because they're no longer possessed. They do bring back pigs in Retro's games,
sort of, yeah.
Sort of.
The fire breathing hogs. Yeah, there's a version of that in Tropical Freeze, and you can make the strained argument, as I have, that they are at least part of the same family.
Well,
of
there's
pigs.
a lot of different types of pigs in Jungle Beat, and one of the mini boss types are smaller pink ones that look sort of like Professor Chops and his ilk, except of course evil and throwing coconuts at you. But so just the whole like pigs as a race that inhabits the world is a concept that has been brought back, but could be fleshed out more with just like the variety presented in Jungle Beat.
See, the rare-centric fan in me just thinks of the Oinks, the Professor Chops people, as more in line with what we saw in Banjo-Tooie with Crispy Bacon and the children swimming in the polluted water.
That's entirely fair.
But I don't think I would like to see, especially if we only get one major Donkey Kong game per console generation, or a new one, because, it seems like we get a remake and then we get a full-fledged new adventure later on. At least
that has been the
case.
pattern.
Yeah, but I wouldn't want to see it sacrificed for a Jungle Beat just because there's so much uncharted territory we still need to do for reviving the Donkey Kong IP. And I think it's important to, if we're not going to have another Donkey Kong Country game immediately, then maybe do a 3D platformer or something, but utilizes the Kremlins. That's kind of in spirit with what Rare and Retro were doing. I would like to see a follow-up to Jungle Beat, as a side game or something, but, and I would be thrilled by that. But if we only got one Donkey Kong console game this generation, I think I still would want it to be either Country or a 64 spiritual successor.
Yeah, I can see that. I generally agree with that sentiment.
All right. Final thoughts, Gibbon. So no matter how you feel or you think you feel about the game, I will argue that no Donkey Kong fan's Kong College education is complete without trying it for themselves. Again, not the new Play Control version. That's not cheating. You're not getting the real experience. And don't play the original with the GameCube controller either. Play it on a GameCube with the DK bongos as nature intended. Because that's what Jungle Beat is about. What nature intends. And fighting tar aliens, and apparently. So, think of it for what it is. DK going on an adventure on islands far south from his own, and things are just a bit weirder there from the context that he's used to. You're not going to get like Sticker Bush Symphony or serene moments like that, but you'll have a fun time. It's not Donkey Kong Country, but it is a fun Donkey Kong adventure. Yeah. So
it's not Donkey Kong Country, it's Donkey Kong Jungle Beat.
And it's not Donkey Kong 64, and that's a good thing. Again, I don't hate Donkey Kong 64, and I don't think it's a absolute terrible game, because as I made the distinction on the last couple episodes, An absolute terrible game would be something like Sonic 06. Donkey Kong 64 is a subpar game that is just too much of the same thing, but it's also not like absolutely the worst game either.
Subpar, but still a decent golf score overall.
Yeah, but Donkey Kong Jungle Beat is fun from beginning to end, and you owe it to yourself. So, Gibbon, this actually felt pretty good. It felt pretty good to own up for some mistakes I've made in the past. So, are there any mistakes you want me to atone for?
Well, I think after E3, the next crowdfunding opportunity should be a nice Japanese traditional tanto so that you can properly commit seppuku over your treatment of the Mario vs. Donkey Kong series.
I will always hate that, and fuck you.
This has been a File 2 production.
Que rico.